Well, I want to welcome everyone for participating, our panel, and those who are joining us virtually. First thing about continuing education, our webinar platform tracks the attendance, and there'll be a certificate issued to each trustee after the 10-week series. I really want to express my appreciation to our sponsor, Dan Barrett, with Barrett Insurance Services, and I'd like to recognize Dan to say a word or two. Hey, Dan.
Okay. Can you hear me now, Charles?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I'm Dan Barrett with Barrett Insurance Services. We are in San Antonio. I see Naomi there, from Northside. We're right down the road from Naomi. We are a full service insurance agency who's been in business over 50 years. We were the first Hispanic commercial insurance agency in San Antonio. So we specialize in employee benefits and medical, group medical. We have specialized networks. We've been very successful. Also, for those schools that are in TRS, we are a option for you. For those that are in TRS, we say that they are having a tough year, like a lot of folks, because of COVID. So they have experienced tremendous claims. So you can expect an increase in the insurance, considerable. Anyway, we are a option four, another option four, and we certainly appreciate MASBA. Anything we can do to narrow the gap and make our children sustainable in the future is what we want to see. So thank you for your time, and we look forward to hearing you.
Thank you very much, Dan. We really appreciate you. At this time, we're going to start in with the panel, and I'd like for everybody to introduce yourself, give us your public education story. I know that we're in a critical phase in the legislative session. I'm so glad to see the expertise that I'm seeing, because we're all going to come away from this with a better understanding of what's going on than what we came into it with. My education story is, it's a long one. I started it in 1988. Brand new board member with 4 adopted kids and stars in my eyes. A few years later, and with hardly any non-gray hair left, I'm still doing my best. I think it's entertaining that the state's about to open up. There's probably some things that you guys want to speak to or want to field questions on. All I can say is, from my point of view, the only thing not open in Texas at this point is a science book. With that said, Dr. Chavez, would you like to start, please, sir?
Certainly. First of all, let me thank MASBA for this opportunity to be with you. I'm Jesus Chavez, a longtime educator, served public education for 35 years as a teacher, central office administrator, and 17 years as superintendent. Most recently, I retired from Round Rock ISD. But upon retirement, I still wanted to have my toe in education. So I was hired as the executive director for South Texas Association of Schools, and have been in that role for about 5 years, I guess 3 sessions altogether. Some of you may remember Martin Peña, who is the former executive director with South Texas Association of Schools. And so, he took me under his wing, handed the organization over to me. And so, we've been going strong with that. My passion, of course, is for children and the learning that's necessary for them to be successful, not only while they're with us in school, but also be successful in life. So I'm happy to be part of education and part to be advocating for Texas children, all Texas children, because all of them are ours. Thank you.
Thank you. Docs?
Well, hi. Thanks for having me. Good to see you, Dr. Chavez and Amy and Naomi. It's always good to be with you all. My name is Docs Gonzalez. I'm Division Director over at TASB Governmental Relations. I've been there about 14 years now, and the time has flown by. I often say that I'm really proud to have this job to contribute to public education, because I come from a family. My parents are both teachers, and I just don't have that disposition. So this is a way that I can give back.
Amy?
Good morning, or actually, I guess we're in afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me. Amy Vineski with TASA, and my experience with PubEd's a little different, product of public education, but I was in the criminal world, or the criminal justice world, for a while, and noticed a theme. A lot of it was uneducated folks are in our prison systems, and I kind of wanted to do something a little bit different. So 2002, I came on board with TASA, and I have been here ever since, and am in awe of all the things that trustees and people who work for our kids in our schools do. So appreciate you having me.
Thank you for being here. You do a great job. Naomi?
Hi, everybody. I'm Naomi Miller. I'm the Director of Government Relations for Northside ISD in San Antonio. There's actually 2 Northside ISDs in Texas, but we are the larger one in San Antonio. I am still fairly new to the public education space. I am starting my 3rd year with Northside, and prior to that, I worked for the state legislature in the Speaker's office. So I like to think that I see both sides in my work in advocacy, to advocate for all students in Texas, because they, our students, our teachers, and our families need a voice there. And so I'm proud to be a part of the Northside family, and to be a Texan. And I'm also a product of public schools. And so I think that that helps me in my everyday job. So I'm glad to be with all of you.
Thank you for being here. Kevin, are you there? Kevin? Okay, we'll catch up with Kevin later. As we are now at this point about 80 days left in the legislative session, I know this is a session unlike any other. Would y'all briefly comment on how the session is different and what you see as far as some of the highlights and lowlights so far, and how we can expect the last 90 days to go? Amy, would you please start?
Sorry about that.
Good.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Obviously, it's a session like no other. We've got a global pandemic going on. That's now basically been a little over a year now. And so, this is coming off the heels of historic legislation that passed, House Bill 3 last go around. So access to the Capitol is a little more limited than we've seen in the past. There seems to be somewhat of a, theme with leadership in some of the major committees, that fewer bills will be going through this go around, and kind of look at some of the major issues. Like, I think we'll look at obviously the budget, the one thing they're constitutionally required to do. I think we'll see some cleanup language in House Bill 3, and then I think we'll see some broader issues on things like elections and bail bonds and some things like that. So it's just every session has its own groove, and this one certainly has it, but it's really different, and it started a little bit slow, but I feel like we're sort of picking up. So, but it's one of those things that folks in the education community are used to pivoting and doing something different. So the legislature is no different.
Thank you. Docs, what do you think?
Much the same. We said it was going to be unprecedented, and it just keeps getting more and more unprecedented each day. So especially after those winter storms we just got through. But you know, we've heard the same as Amy. You know, legislators, especially before the storm, seemed content with passing the budget and getting out of town. And since the storm, especially, there's just been a slew of issues that have risen to prominence. And you know, some additional items to the ones that Amy mentioned. You know, broadband is going to be an issue that they're really going to want to go and address. It's just one of those things that the kids are getting devices, but there isn't always a way for them to connect to their schools, and so that's become an issue certainly that they want to address. But it is, you know, we're starting to see bills being posted and here in committee starting to take up that legislation, and it's interesting because as much as they sound like they want to get out of there, some of these bills seem like not as significant as these bigger issues that they're addressing. So I don't know if they're just kind of putting some feeler bills out there to get into the groove of it, or what. But we're definitely looking very carefully at some of this legislation.
Naomi, what do you think?
This is my 10th session in some capacity, and it seems to be the slowest one I've seen, and the least amount of activity on the floor. It's been really interesting. I looked at last session just for fun and started typing in random bill numbers to see when they were referred, and we didn't even start. The House and the Senate didn't even start referring bills till 2 or 3 weeks later than they would have. And of course, the storm was in the middle, and so we missed a week there. What I'll add to that is I think the legislature, I'm hopeful that the legislature will address assessment and accountability, considering the COVID slide and how that's going to continue to affect students for years to come. I mean, you start thinking about kiddos that are in the 9th grade, are they going to be able to graduate in 3 or 4 years and have their learning loss mitigated by then? And so I think assessment and accountability is hopefully going to be something that's taken up. I say this cautiously, but redistricting, because of the delay in the census data, we know there's going to be a special session probably in the fall. And usually, while that's kind of a sticking point for us GR folks, it's actually an opportunity that if things don't happen by sine die, by the last day of session, there's an opportunity to add those things to the call if the governor chooses to do so when we do go back for redistricting. So I have a lot of optimism as we sit here on March 8th.
Well, that's a good thing. Thank you. Dr. Chavez.
Well, I guess everybody's mentioned this, and that's COVID-19 and the challenges we face to having accessibility to our representatives and senators. So I think that's going to continue to be very challenging. So I think here the telephone's going to be very useful. Emails are going to be very useful. And I think at the appropriate time, you know, one of the things I think we need to do is to make an extra effort at being there, right? I mean, if there's a hearing and there's an important bill before the committee, you know, we need to be there. And so I think that's one of the things that I would emphasize. I think the other thing that's a little bit surprising and somewhat of some good news is that we didn't wind up to be, you know, $4 billion or $5 billion in the hole as we initially thought. I think here with the revenue estimate, you know, coming in $1 billion short, the budget cuts that were made, which will actually cover that $1 billion, and the availability of not only the Economic Stabilization Fund, but also the federal funds. I want to keep pressing on identifying the needs that districts have, that children have, and kind of keep their feet to the fire, if you will, so that there is something done about the additional necessary funds that school districts need, not only for the acceleration of instruction, but the other COVID-19 related items. So I hope there is promise here. I hope, you know, we wind up the session, you know, in a better situation than we thought we were going into the session here a few months back.
Thank you very much. Kevin, were you able to track on what he was talking about?
Yeah, I am. The first thing that I want to see is that now that Biden's about to sign the new COVID relief bill, and they're going to put a bunch of money out there for school districts in the bill. Whether the legislature is going to steal it, they did the last time, and I'm not unsympathetic to the plight of the poor, but the poor appropriators, but they did. The CARES Act, they took all the money that was put out for public schools, and now we have a bunch of federal spending requirements and no money. So we'll see whether they do that again in terms of what's out there. I have concerns that they are going to do just that. So that's the first thing in terms of what's out there. The second thing is that we have a doomsday machine that's going to get blamed, that COVID is going to take the blame for, but it doesn't have anything to do with it. HB3 is a doomsday machine. The compression of tax rates, the annual compression of tax rates essentially requires the legislature. What they used to do was put the savings from rising property values into new funding elements. Now, the legislature is going to be required to put the new money that they get from rising property values into subsidizing local compression. And then, in other words, funding lower total revenues for the district, which means that appropriations for additional students, which is a function of life in Texas because we're still growing, and appropriations for new costs that we're going to incur are going to have to come out of the general fund. And we're not going to do very good in terms of what's out there. So I do remain concerned about HB3 and what it's going to do to long range to public education funding. This obsession about lowering tax rates, it needs to stop. I don't know how to do it. If I did, then I could bottle it and make a lot of money. But we need to start talking about that in terms of what's out there, because the legislature's putting themselves and us in a box.
Excellent observations there, sir. Why don't y'all kind of follow this thread of thought and give us what you believe to be some of the best ways that we can advocate for our students and for our schools. Amy, you want to tee it up?
Sure. I think what we have to do, going to point about a bunch of federal money coming in. We've got $5.5 billion sitting here from ESSER 2. I think we're going to have anywhere, I think it's around 12 or 11, which we're assuming they will pass it on Tuesday at the federal level. I think we're going to have to make our case for this additional funding. And we certainly can do that. We've got all kinds of learning loss, as Jesus mentioned earlier, that we need to talk about. And then, as Naomi mentioned earlier, also talking about that this learning loss isn't going to go away when we all get vaccinated and get herd immunity. We're going to have to be working on, closing these gaps over the next, couple of years. And so I think it's incumbent upon trustees and superintendents now to be talking to their legislators and saying, here's why we need this money. Don't say, here's why we need the money, and here's what we're going to spend it on. We're going to spend it on summer school, not only for this summer, but for the following summer. We're going to need to pay teachers more for these things that they're going to do in addition to. We're going to need to do tutoring. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to go and talk to lawmakers, because this is a bunch of money, and say, look, our kids need this money, our school districts need this money. So again, I think it's incumbent upon us to make that argument for this funding. So, and then also, I will say this too, I think there was an issue about fund balance, and I don't think that issue is going away. I think it's quieted down right now. But I think the other thing that folks need to be talking to their lawmakers about is how they've been using their fund balances during this pandemic, and then also with all the recent ice storms. So those are my thoughts at this point.
Excellent thoughts. Docs, you want to take it from there?
Well, yeah, I mean, and I was going to say that the exact same thing. The fund balance issues is, you know, during the last House Public Education hearing, Representative Dan Huberty made sure that all the committee members heard that there are about $7 billion of fund balances in excess of what TA recommends that that school districts hold, and I think that school leaders really need to be talking to their legislators about what they're using those fund balances for currently. I know a lot of districts are doing a lot of remediation, a lot of programs for kids right now, and legislators need to know that you all are already using that money. And even before COVID, a lot of districts were operating on deficit or deficit budgets that were, you know, using their fund balances to kind of keep them afloat. So I think the legislators need to be informed on how fund balances just aren't savings accounts across the state that that have money just sitting in it. That's going to be a really important topic, and also, just as Amy pointed out, giving very specific examples of things that this federal stimulus money can be used for to help get kids back up to speed. Legislators were very it was actually a little offensive how they were saying that schools weren't doing enough to find the kids that were missing and that weren't in school, because I know that schools are doing, you know, a lot of things to going out and finding these kids, and as I was telling people, it's not just an economic issue in terms of getting ADA. It's an educational issue in terms of making sure those kids are in class and learning, so that you have to do less remediation on the back end. So you know, telling legislators how schools are going about and doing these things, I think, is going to be really key to securing a lot of this funding and not having them just supplant it, as Kevin was saying, and save the state budget again using these federal dollars.
Jesus, do you want to add to that?
Certainly. I mean, I guess three things are coming to my mind, and you know, Amy mentioned the need for school board members, for superintendents to communicate with their legislators, and we can't overemphasize that. You know, picking up that phone, writing an email, visiting the Capitol, you know, all these things are very important, and so, you know, we each individually need to make a commitment to that. So that's one. Number two here, you know, if you think of the COVID slide, in my mind, it's not going to be a one summer fix, a 1 year fix. I mean, I'm looking at it longer term, right? 3 to 5 years, I think, you know, is what we'll be looking at. And as you think about that, then think of the effort, the programming, the curriculum, the materials, you know, everything that it's going to take to advance our students and catch them up. You know, those are the things I think we need to be communicating to our legislators. As it relates to that, and I don't know that I've seen yet a good vehicle, if you will, to access those funds. I mean, what bill is going to provide that? And here, there are federal dollars available, and I think we've got to say, you know, we've got to use federal dollars for COVID and the COVID slide and other COVID-related expenditures. You know, we've got compensatory education. Maybe it's modifying that and providing a COVID element to that. Somehow we've got to have a vehicle to get these funds to the district, you know, for the acceleration of learning. So that was kind of the second area. The third area, and it's already been mentioned, but that's the emphasis I think we've got to have on technology. COVID has demonstrated that we need an ongoing investment. You know, yes, we've bought a lot of computers, we've bought a lot of devices. Some school districts have even put up their own towers. You know, we've got to resolve this issue of connectivity. You know, whether it be, yes, providing, I mean, I guess I was happy to hear that, you know, they're talking about, and the commissioner, I think, mentioned, you know, paying for connectivity. I think that's important. In addition to that, providing access to school districts that don't yet have it, right? There's no connection, there aren't any services. That's going to be expensive, and I think we're going to need to be willing to say, yes, we're willing to support that expenditure to provide access to those students that don't have that. So those are the three things, communicating our needs to legislators, COVID expenses, covering those specifically, the learning slide, and then third, the technology connectivity area.
Thank you. Before we throw this to Naomi for her thoughts, I want to encourage the participants to send in any comments or questions you might have into the chat, and we'll try to get those answered as well. Go ahead, Naomi.
What I want to add, all great points made so far. What I want to add is the conversation around fund balance has changed so much, because this is the first time that I can think of where we've had a crisis or a disaster that's affected every single school district in Texas. It's not like some school districts were affected by a hurricane and their fund balances were affected, or whatever else that might be. I don't think the fund balance conversation should be the same moving forward, because of all of these unanticipated expenses that districts have had to endure. It's a whole new playing field. So that's my thought on fund balances. And then as far as school boards and superintendents advocating, I know it's a different session and the Capitol halls are kind of empty. It's not the same. But I believe that calling and writing letters is just as effective. And I think that our legislators and their staff are pretty used to doing virtual meetings. I would stay aggressive with your advocacy ways, requesting, online meetings, and it kind of makes it easier because you don't have to run up and down the halls and go from the extension all the way back to the Capitol and the Capitol back, it's a little easier to access those folks, in my opinion, so far. And so stay aggressive and keep the conversation open about those federal dollars that came from the December package and that are about to come, hopefully, from the package signed or passed tomorrow, because those are dollars that can help again, take care of some of these expenses that every school district in Texas has had to endure. This isn't an East Texas problem. This isn't a South Texas problem. This affects every single student in Texas. And so you shouldn't have any member of the legislature saying, well, that's not my district. I'm not going to vote for that, or I'm not going to advocate for that. This affects everyone. And so I think that anyone you contact should pay attention to this, because it does affect their constituents and the parents and teachers and kids in their Senate or House districts. So I think just staying aggressive and having that conversation as they work on the budget, that those federal dollars are available and that they should flow those and fulfill their obligations to the state budget the way they would have if those federal dollars weren't there, and that our districts, regardless of fund balance, need those dollars, and they were meant to come to us. That's what the intention was. And so I think pushing that narrative, that's a little different from any other session, right? Again, every session's different. That narrative is just as important as any other moving forward on any other subject like broadband or anything else. So.
Good points. Kevin.
Yeah, let me say something in terms of what, and it's not different from what everybody else said, but it's a little bit different. I think that we need to be careful. We need to not waste a crisis. As the old Clinton administration, the statement that don't ever waste a crisis. We're as we sit here today, the traditional notion of 9 months school, 3 months off in the summer is just gotten exploded. Because we're all looking at catch up and stuff in the summer. The notion of what the regular classroom looks like has just been exploded. We now have gotten technology in the hands of everybody. We haven't totally mastered the art of how to use it, but we certainly distributed it, and we've learned a lot about providing access to that. This is our chance to transform public education. what we need to do is to this isn't in my opinion, the rhetoric needs to stop at this is how we're going to play catch up, and it needs to go to this is how we're going to educate. That we use this opportunity and where we are to create a new normal. And the new normal is more intensive, uses technology better, maybe has some remote classes and things of that nature, because now we've got this, we need to, it's not a particular agenda I have, but I think that we need to capture people's imagination. We need to re-engineer, because the old paradigm is kind of on the rocks. We need to kind of rebuild it in a way that makes sense educationally. We're going to have short-term money, probably some, in order to do that, to extend the year. That's one of the requirements of the federal dollars. If we build that in a couple of years in a row, it's going to be hard to go back. So we need to be thinking about how we transform what the business is. So we're not saying this is a bridge to going back to where we were 10 years ago. This is a bridge to whatever the new thing that we can imagine is, and we need to start that process now, and we need to lead it, not have it dictated to us by somebody on the Senate Education Committee or House Public Ed. We need to imagine what this could be like, and we need to build it, and then draft the funds. So I think we should not let this opportunity to go by to advocate the significant restructuring. We've tossed it all up in the air. We have a huge opportunity to do so.
I think that's excellent point you're making. We do have an opportunity for visionary leadership to step up at this time. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to throw in on that? It sure made me think.
Well, if we're talking about leadership, one thing that was a little bit disappointing was I feel like school districts were thrown under the bus a little bit when the governor announced that he was going to be lifting the statewide mask mandate, and then left it up to local school districts to fend off the restless hordes, we might say. But yeah. I've already seen some emails, and I'm sure you all have too, from parents threatening to send their maskless kids to school no matter what, and that they'll be visiting their kids every day for the rest of the school year maskless. And so I wish that school districts would have been provided a little more cover and a little more support in saying, it is. He did say that it is optional, and that districts can continue providing masks, but it's put a lot of districts in a really tough spot. And Charles, you're a former school board member. You know probably better than anyone that when parents are angry about something district wide like that, you're going to hear about it at the grocery store.
Well, and the truth is, Docs, I'm still a school board member.
Well, that's true.
We have about a 50-50 split if you wanted to go out and poll all the parents. But one of the things that I think may be most useful, depending upon where you are, what your county setup is, we are taking our lead from the Denton County Public Health, and they are following CDC guidelines. And the governor is welcome to safeguard the economy. It's his job. Our job is to safeguard our children and our teachers. And he can do what he needs to do, and we will do what we need to do. We'll probably all have an opponent next time. So,
but let me say this about the governor in terms of what he didn't say, what he said. He did not, with respect to the school district's authority to run their things, to run their own business, he did not get in the way. Now he kind of left you on an island. The individual school districts on an island by creating the impression, but in terms of the authority, there's no doubt that the school trustees have the ability to make those determinations. It's a tougher call with the governor kind of leading the cheerleaders, but let there be no doubt that in terms of the words on the paper, that the authority to require masks or whatever kind of remedial measures is in the hands of the school districts, probably more so than it was since he withdrew his order.
Charles, can I come back to Kevin's comments about taking the opportunity to change education and
Absolutely.
reform it and move forward?
Yes, sir.
I guess, and I want to also relate it to COVID-19 and some of the issues and really some of the suggestions that are coming up. Here, one of the concerns I have, as it relates to changing education, is the idea that for pre-kindergarten students, particularly kindergarten students, that if they haven't been in school, that they're supposed to go to first grade, but let's have them repeat kindergarten. And that's a proposal that is out there, right? Now, if I remember my research correctly, whenever you retain a student, the chances of graduation are lessened, right? That's what the research shows. And so that's really the concern I have for retaining, if you will, first graders who would have to go to kindergarten because they never attended kindergarten. Now, as I think about that, then I say, well, how are we going to accelerate these students? And do we have the policies, the practices, the laws necessary to jump a student forward when indeed they learn the content and are able to master it? If I remember correctly, that's a very difficult thing to do. You can put policies in place, you can do that kind of thing, but it's a very rigorous and a very difficult way to advance students in that way. So I think that's something that we ought to do, is to think about how do we advance students if indeed we're going to make them go into kindergarten when they're supposed to be in first grade. And there may be some other implications there for even the upper grades. And really what I'm talking about here is, hey, we got to get away from this 1 year, 1 grade situation and create an opportunity where students advance and move forward. I mean, we've been talking about that for years and years, decades and decades. I think that's something that we can talk about and promote. The other part to this piece is that we've got in-person instruction. We've got students who can learn online, and then you've got that hybrid situation. Where are the bills that are going to allow that for public school districts? It seems that everything that's coming forward still relates to in-person instruction. It was always difficult for me to say, I want to expand that to online learning because the rules and the laws that are in place don't facilitate that. I think we've got to take the opportunity here to promote that and allow for hybrid for those students that want to do hybrid, online for students that want to do online, and the in-person, and allow the flexibility for school districts and school board members to be able to do that. So as it relates again to Kevin's idea of, yes, let's move forward, let's change how we do education, those would be the things that I would say we need to talk about.
Excellent. Thank you. Naomi, you seem to have such good ideas. You want to tag on to this one?
I definitely think, again, I feel like I keep talking about long term. I have a niece that started high school virtually. My brother and sister-in-law kept my niece and nephew both home virtually this school year. They're both doing very well. My sister-in-law happens to be a teacher, though, who's a stay-at-home mom. So they've succeeded, and of course I'm going to say they're the smartest kids I know, but they've been successful. First of all, going back to the mask conversation, I don't want to say too much about that, but there's not an adolescent vaccine yet, right? So that's something that's completely missing and is not on the table at all. So I think about next school year, but even if the kids get vaccinated in the summer, my niece might say, hey, I think I want to do high school at home. And I think she should be able to do that with or without some threat of a pandemic. I think that now that some of these kids, if we want to look at the positive side of virtual learning, some of these kids have had a taste of that. They might be more successful at that, and they may want to do that depending on their taste for extracurriculars and things. they should have an option, and it shouldn't be a burden on a school district to give my niece the option to learn at home. It shouldn't be a burden to access funding for her. It shouldn't be a burden to a teacher to teach her virtually. All of those things are really complicated, and I think that they're a brand new conversation that we have to have because of that side of it. So I think that the legislature needs to really look at that as something new moving forward. And we've got the state virtual school network, but it's set up in a way that's not easily accessible for our school districts. So I think it needs to be equitable. I think it needs to not be a burden, like I said, to districts and teachers. And it needs to have robust curriculum for if kiddos want to learn at home. And I think that conversation is happening, but I don't see a ton about it. And as far as the current situation we're in, and like I said, we don't have a adolescent vaccine yet. It's detrimental to our planning process as we move into the next school year. We have this waiver that we're operating on for ADA. We don't know what's going to happen when we go back in August for 21-22. And so I think that it should be discussed, and hopefully it will be, but we have, what did you say, 80 days left in the session. And, the filing deadline's this Friday, X, Y, and Z. And of course, things can happen even without with bills that have already been filed. There can always be something that happens. But again, I think that that's something that we really need to consider is virtual learning moving forward, pandemic or not. So those are my thoughts.
Since you mentioned virtual learning, there's a House Bill 1468, virtual options in local districts. Do you know anything about that, Naomi? I know.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think it's by Ashby. Amy, Docs, am I right? I don't remember who.
Bill?
Darby. 1468. Sorry, it's a really bare bones bill that kind of talks about what I'm talking about. But the complexities of everything I just mentioned, and probably things I'm not even thinking of, that's a good vehicle, I think. But going back to the process of hearings and the bills that are being heard, to me, if this was kind of on the plate of everyone, that would have been one of the first bills that would have been heard so that they could start working on that. But yes, that is a good bill, and I think that that's a good vehicle, but it's I think it's a very bare bill, but it does mention some of what I'm talking about.
Amy, please.
If it's
Yeah, and-
1468, sorry, if it was 1468, that's a Keith Bell bill.
Oh,
Yeah, providing.
Yeah, what I was going to add is, if you looked back a year ago, I don't think schools would have felt nearly as comfortable with the use of technology and delivering instruction as they do right now. What the pandemic, created for school districts was an opportunity, whether they liked it or not, really, to really look at how they could deliver instruction in a different way. And so that's probably one of the pluses that have come out of COVID and our experience with that in public education. But I also think that, we're balancing that with the whole idea that, having a kid usually in front of a teacher is usually the best idea, but that's not the only way. And again, to Kevin's point, Jesus's point, this is a time to really think outside of the box. And I know that I've talked to superintendents across the state, and a lot of them are getting asks from parents about how to continue virtual education. And so there are some discussions that are ongoing at the Capitol. I think everyone's trying to figure out what the parameters are to find a way to be able to deliver that. And that doesn't mean adding on, what teachers are already doing now, and say you've got your, as the commissioner calls them, Zoomies and Roomies, and having to do those both, but trying to come up with some robust programs that school districts can offer to their students within their school district. Another option that doesn't burden too much the teacher. But then I think it's important too to remember that school districts need to have the ability to, if those students are not succeeding in that virtual environment, then schools need to have the ability to bring those, or to make those kids come back and to we'll call the traditional school setting, so that there's not additional learning loss. But again, if you'd have told me a year ago that we would be talking about school districts wanting to, go certain directions with online learning, I would have told you they're not there yet. So I think it's an exciting time. I think we've got to be really careful with the bill language to make sure that we get it right. I'm not saying we got to get it perfect, but get it right. So it's going to be kind of exciting to see how we move forward with that part of public education.
Great. Anybody else?
If I can just expand on that last point, yeah, being really careful about that language, I think, is going to be a big deal, especially when there will be a lot of people trying to expand virtual instruction to include private provider, well, not include, but to expand the private providers' footprint on the virtual instruction arena, and expand charter schools' footprint to allow them to provide more statewide virtual programs, and so which has been granted already to a few by the commissioners. So I think it is going to be incumbent upon everyone working on that language to make sure we keep it so that the districts are able to provide the virtual instruction for their kids as best as they can, and provide them that flexibility and the resources and support to do that. But to be careful when we start, looking at statewide programs from other kinds of entities.
I think that's a really, really solid point. My district, to your point, my district's got 8,000 kids in a virtual situation. We know not all of them are thriving. And what we're trying to do now for next year is, we've had teachers who had multiple preps who weren't doing virtual by choice. They just stepped up because somebody had to do it. And what we're trying to do is create a virtual school where the people that are running it want to be doing it. They have the gifts to do it. The support is there so that it can be truly empowering if it's well administered and well used by the kids. We spent millions out of our fund balance getting the devices and the connectivity issues settled. And now we've got this brand new platform, and it's not going to be figured out in 6 months, but we are going to be a whole lot better than we were in the past. And to your point, we know that there are wolves in the fold in the form of virtual charters who will make incredible promises. Don't know whether they'll deliver on them or not, but we believe in my district that if we don't have a high quality product put out there, somebody else is going to come in and sell one. So that's that's my 2 bits from North Texas. Kevin, you've been quiet for too long.
Okay, to me, the key to this is that you have to build in, and what we haven't addressed, and now's the time to start doing that. What is your feedback loop? That is that, and it's not a statewide issue. But if the state's going to grant funding, what's the local feedback loop? What do you got? What's going to take? Somebody said something about, well, we need to make certain kids go back to the classroom because they're not thriving. Okay, how are we going to do that? All right. How are we going to ensure when they come out and check ADA that there's academic rigor and all that? We have the opportunity, I think, if we can demonstrate a feedback loop with respect to the measuring and requiring academic rigor, to get a fair amount of flexibility out of this, but we need to take it on ourselves, and we need to figure out how to do that as educators. And when so far, we really haven't. Okay, we've kind of, and I know it's been a crisis, and we've learned about it. We've learned some stuff in terms of grading and feedback and all that, but we're mostly counting noses. Now we need to figure out how to reintroduce rigor. If we can figure out how to reintroduce rigor into this and demonstrate that to the guys at the circus, then I think they'll give us some flexibility I think that's what Brad's looking for as well, in terms of what's out there. And he's an advocate of hybrids and all this other kind of stuff, but we're going to have to convince him that we can do this. Now, there's another option, which is the reason why VSN gets what it's getting is they're tail end funded. All right, they have to pass the examinations, and if they pass, they get funded. So I'm not sure schools are willing to risk that. That's why there was a restriction on that. But we need to look at the introduction of the even matters. We're requiring academic rigor with respect to our coursework.
Thank you, sir. This is for everybody, but I'm looking at Docs and Amy first, I think. Are there anything that superintendents and school board members should not be doing this session?
I would go first and say they should not be assuming that nothing is going to happen this session. You know, it's kind of like a 2-year-old, you know, when they get really quiet and you start wondering, ruh-roh, what's going on. So, you know, to Jesus's point earlier, you know, when there are big bills up, you know, obviously safety is an issue, but trying to be at the Capitol at certain times, I think is going to be critical. I do think that one thing that worries me is having very large omnibus bills roaming around in which amendments could be tacked on in the last hours of the session. That kind of concerns me. So I think it really goes back to kind of what we've all said, and that is, don't be a stranger to your lawmaker. Get the point out there now while you can about stimulus money and all those things that we need to be doing to get kids, you know, back to where they need to be. Start talking about fund balance. Start talking about a voucher that may be in a bill somewhere else. All those things you can talk about, and they don't necessarily have to have a bill number to them. If you can talk generically about those issues, then that's half of the race, if not even more so. So that way, when those issues come up, maybe in an amendment form on the floor, then your lawmaker knows, okay, here's what my school districts are thinking, and here's probably how I should act, versus the usual, you know, waiting for an alert to come out with a specific bill number. So if you can talk generically about, you know, a lot of the big issues, I think that's, you know, that's 90% of the game, and then follow all of the associations and folks like Naomi who are working at school districts.
Thank you, Amy. Time has flown, and I am told that I need to get everybody to give me concluding remarks and a call to action. Amy, I think you just gave me yours. It's excellent. Docs, you want to throw one out there?
Sure, yeah, and it just goes along with the last question that you threw out, was basically don't expect other people to do it. Trustees need to be out there contacting their legislators and letting them know their issues and doing it quickly.
Thank you.
And quickly, I need to jump off for a meeting with the legislative office. So I really appreciate your time and everyone, but thank you all very much for having me, and we'll see you all down the road.
Thank you very much. Jesus?
First of all, thank you for the opportunity to be with you. The thing that comes to my mind as a concluding statement, and for things that school board members ought to stop doing, right? I want them to pay attention to bills that we may not support as well. I don't know why the new House Bill 3 comes to my mind, but be on the lookout for bills that we would not support as well.
Excellent advice. Naomi?
My advice to tack on to Amy and Dr. Chavez is taper your expectations on your specific legislative priorities in your agenda, which Northside has a very robust, very relevant list of priorities, but I think every session you have to kind of step back and say what can get done and what are the actual priorities of the entire state. So focus on that federal money, have those early conversations, and mention things that are specific to Northside, but to like Northside for us rather, to your district, and but know that there are sessions to come when we can accomplish some other things, because we can't expect the legislature to cover everything. So zero in on those really important issues that will help mitigate what happened with the pandemic, make sure we're fully funded, make sure we get those ESSER dollars, and that we can be successful until the legislature meets again until 2023.
Thank you. Kevin?
Bad ideas accumulate over time. They need to be public information with respect to members need to be educated. This is going to be a late arriving session. A lot of stuff's going to get done in what we used to call the Christmas tree bill, where everybody's hanging ornaments on this stuff at the last minute and in conference. We need to do the groundwork well before then.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Barrett, would you like to say thank you and goodbye? Go ahead, sir.
We've unmuted you, Mr. Barrett.
Okay, I wanted to say thank you for everything. Thank you for inviting me. You're exactly right, all of you. Kevin, it's time to take advantage of the situation. We got to make sure that this federal money goes to where it was intended.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all so much. You've all made a really good contribution. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.